What's up guys, you're watching Li-Fi TCG. I've got a quick Pioneer deck profile for you today on green-black Umori control. So this is a little deck that I brewed up for the first Pioneer RCQ season. And of course we have another Pioneer RCQ season coming up at the moment. So quite a few people interested in playing Pioneer. I just thought I'd share this deck again, the current state that it's at, and you can figure out for yourself whether it might be something you're interested in trying or not. So the companion, of course, Umori. Every card in your deck must be the same type, and as you can see from this sideboard, every card in the list is a sorcery. So we'll get back to the sideboard once we're finished with the main deck. So you might think it's a little bit of a unnecessary struggle to win the game with only sorceries. The way we go about doing that is with the Seasons Past engine. So if you remember this deck from Standard quite a while ago, probably almost 10 years ago now, how this works is you play Seasons Past and your deck has tutors in it. So you cast the Seasons Past, you return all the different mana costs from your graveyard, including a tutor, for example like Dark Petition. Then the Seasons Past goes back into your library when it resolves instead of the graveyard. Then you cast Dark Petition, at any point you get your Seasons Past back and you return all those cards. So you have this like ultimate attrition grindy endgame that basically no deck can beat when you get that going. The challenge, of course, is like staying alive and dodging counterspells. So, opposite of what I usually do, I'll start with the like expensive end of the mana curve and then work my way down. So we have the 2 Seasons Past as the 6 drops. 5 mana cards, we have 2 Dark Petition. Working our way down, we have more 5 mana cards actually, of course. 4 Invoke the Ancients. So this is like a sort of main win con. You get 8 power and 10 toughness across 2 bodies for 5 mana, which is a pretty good deal. When decks like black-red midrange are some of the most popular strategies in the format, having this thing, these 2 tokens that completely brick wall like Graveyard Trespasser or Bonecrusher Giant or Bloodchief Harvester, you know, like all these cards, like the Fable token can't get past it. Then if you're removing their creatures, you can start swinging, like 8 power is quite a quick clock. You know, it's just a very effective sort of like mid-range card. Against the Spirits decks, you give your tokens reach, it's very hard for them to attack into it. Like how the mono green decks at the moment have got such a big boost from the new Pelucranos, because it has reach, it's a big reach creature. Yeah, and your like mono sorcery deck, having access to like creatures just gives you that extra tempo. You can start attacking and blocking, and actually having a board presence is very important. So 4 Invoke the Ancients. I think that's all the 5 mana cards. Working our way down the mana curve now to the 4 drops, we have 2 Sweepers. We have 1 Languish, 1 Extinction Event. So the nice thing about Languish is that Umori and the tokens from Invoke the Ancients, they all both have 5 toughness. So Languish doesn't kill it. They're also both even. So if you name odd, then it's safe from Extinction Event, because Umori's are 4 and 0 on the tokens is even as well. Which is nice because the prime target for Extinction Event in some matchups is odd, right, versus green. Green goes 1-3-5, so Extinction Event is the perfect card there. But yeah, it's just nice to have Extinction Event as like this kind of safety valve. Any random creature your opponent has, just exile it, no questions asked. If you play against decks like Heroic, for example, that effect is excellent to have. One more 4 drop, I'm playing 1 Mastermind's Acquisition in the main deck as well. In a way, this is for access to sideboard cards, because you do have some quite high utility sideboard cards that you might want in game 1, like Necromentia, for example. But the other thing is it's just nice to have an extra proactive card in the 4-drop slot. Because when you're resolving your Seasons Past, if you're playing against like a control deck or a matchup where you've already cleared the board, your 4 mana target to get with Seasons Past, your only option are like board clears, which in a lot of situations aren't that useful. So just having like Diabolic Tutor in the list is fine as well. So that's the last 4-drop. On to the 3s. So we'll start with the playset of 3-drop, which is the 4 Field Trip. So it's a nice clean 2-for-1, search for a land, learn for a card. Pretty good options for the learn, we'll get to that when we talk about the sideboard. Yeah, it just basically does everything the deck wants to do. You want to be ramping because you have like, this ramps you from 3 to 5, which is where your Dark Petition and your Invoke the Ancients are, unless you start making plays. Ramp is of course excellent with Seasons Past because the way that in-game works, you're always going to be spending all your mana, you're never going to run enough cards. So the ramp is pretty important. And then we have a few more like spicy one-offs in the 3 mana spot as well. We have 1 Soul Transfer, which looks a bit weak, but you just want to have access to this kind of like Dreadbore effect. Like sadly you can't actually play Dreadbore because the mana doesn't work, but this is the next best thing basically, and the exile can be highly relevant as well when you play against those cards like Cavalier or you know, if you hit their Sheoldred or whatever with it, they can't get it back with Takenuma, or you know, Croxer, like these kind of things, like the exile does matter as well. So yeah, just one of this kind of like Hero's Downfall card. Playing 1 Go Blank as well. It's just nice to have a 2-for-1 that can attack your opponent's hand, and the Tormod Script effect is nice to have access to as well. So yeah, it just lets you attack from different angles. Then the last 3 mana card is 1 Dryad's Revival. So this is a bit of a unique card. It's like Recollect with Flashback for 5 mana. So it just lets you grind a bit more resilience versus counterspells because you have to answer it twice. When you're like tutor chaining, if you have enough mana, you can like Dark Petition for this, then play this to get the Dark Petition back, and now you have like an additional resource in your graveyard to work with. If you have a lot of mana, that's a play that you have access to, which is quite good. Yeah, it's just a nice flexible option. If your Seasons Pasts get like countered or discarded, you have ways to get them back. So you know, you're not like totally bottlenecked on if you like mill one of your Seasons Past or something. We'll get into how that can happen with the next card in the 2-drop slot, which is the Witherbloom Command. So in some situations you don't have great targets for this, but like getting a land from your top 3 cards and trading 2 life is fine most of the time. And it's very, very high upside if you get a 2-for-1 with it. So if you mill yourself and you kill the like Mana Dork, or you can remove like Bankbuster as long as they don't have any creature to crew in response. Willful Haven can kill that with the non-creature kill mode. Yeah, there's definitely multiple few options available. Versus humans, you have lots of targets for the 1 toughness kill mode. Yeah, it's just a very, very flexible, very high ceiling, and the floor is like relatively high as well. The only problem is if you use the mill yourself and you just miss on lands because you don't have like fetch lands or anything. But you have like relatively high number of lands in the deck to hit, so it's usually not that bad. The next 2-drop for Collective Brutality. It's a little bit like inefficient at all the things that it does, but like the flexibility is very important. And it also lets you trade resources in like a kind of indiscriminate way, which can be useful in the late game when you're doing Seasons Past stuff. Like often in that like very late game situation, you have tons of cards in hand, but you're more bottlenecked on mana. So Collective Brutality with the discard escalate gives you an effective way to convert cards in your hand into some kind of impactful effect, whether that's only draining life or you're killing an extra thing or you're making them discard something extra. That all adds up. So yeah, just the fact that it's like modal disfigure / duress is already like quite fine, and then you have all the other options too with the drain and the escalate. Then the 1 mana cards, we have some of the best cards in the deck, to be honest. We have the 4 Thoughtseize, of course, exactly what the deck wants to like trade resources. You all know what Thoughtseize does. 1 mana removal, we can't play Fatal Push because it's the wrong card type. Instead we've got Bloodchief's Thirst, which is almost as good. Being able to kick it to kill planeswalkers and bigger creatures comes up a lot. And then the last spell in the main deck, we just have 1 Dig Up. So it's sort of like part of the mana base, and it also functions as another tutor effect, whether you want to like get it back with the Seasons Past to like reinforce your late game, or you use it to find the Seasons Past when you like top deck it in the mid game. Of course, both options are available, and if you need it on turn 1, it just finds your swamp or your another forest. Nice, like high impact, low opportunity cost. One of the lands quickly. Not too much to say about the mana base because it's pretty straightforward. It's just lands that make black and green mana. So we have 4 Blooming Marsh, the fast land from Kaladesh, 4 Shockland, the 4 Overgrown Tomb. We have 4 Darkbore Pathway. We also have 3 Deathcap Glade, only 3. It's a bit clunky if you draw too many early, so just 3 of those. Then the basics, we have 1 Swamp, so you can't overload on swamps because it makes your Invoke the Ancients too hard to cast. So we have 1 Swamp and 5 basic forests. You also need a decent number of forests to make sure your field trips are online, because it only gets basic forest. Then the last lands, we have 1 Argoth, which is quite nice. Making the bears is good because against things like the Bloodtithe Harvester and the Fable token or whatever, like a 2/2 creature in this format is actually quite relevant. And the milling yourself just helps you set up your Seasons Pass for later, so that's fine as well. Then we also have 3 Boseijus. So usually you can just play the first one as a land, that's fine, then you have the other ones later as removal. So having access to some type of instant speed removal in your mono sorcery deck, of course, has a lot of utility. Being able to kill manlands with it is great because you don't really have any other good ways to do that. Yeah, it's just a very powerful card, and of course it's worth noting Umori only reduces the mana cost of sorceries, of course, not lands, but it is a legendary creature, so if you have your Umori in play, Boseiju reduces its own cost, so you can just activate it for 1 mana, which is pretty nice. And then onto the sideboard. Of course, effectively 14 card sideboard because you have the 1 Umori. More sweepers used against the creature decks. So we have the other 3 copies of Languish plus 1 Shadow's Verdict. So, like I said with the Extinction Event, having the mass exile is very good because it's like quite hard to answer. And being able to cleanly hit everything that's like mana cost 3 and lower is excellent because versus spirits and humans and things like that, they can have everything up the curve from 1 to 3. So sometimes the toughness of the creatures gets too big for Languish, so you want the Shadow's Verdict. Shadow's Verdict also doesn't hit Umori, which is nice. And also the nice thing about Shadow's Verdict is you board it in versus the sack decks, like the Rakdos, Cat Oven, or like whatever sacrifice stuff they're playing. Because you exile their graveyard stuff with it as well, so they can't like hide their creatures in the graveyard to dodge your exile effect. It'll exile their stuff from the graveyard. It also exiles all of the like Obnixilis Planeswalker copies if they're still playing that card. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the Shadow's Verdict. Then we also have the 3 Go Blank. So versus control decks where you want to like attack their hand more, it's very good versus like Greasefang where you're trying to like control their graveyard, or Phoenix also controlling their graveyard. It's a great effect you want there. You can board it in versus like mono green just to like make sure they don't hit critical mass. You exile their Storm the Festivals. Yeah, it's just like a very flexible card. I've seen a tweet from I think Doomwake, the Moto player, comparing this card to like the surgical extraction of Pioneer in the sense that like people board it in too many matchups when it's actually not that effective. And yeah, I would be careful not to do that, but if you like look at the cards you have to board in and out in certain matchups, having this kind of like generic flexible thing to like upgrade some of your main deck options is very solid. And yeah, in some matchups it is like a very ideal tool to be using. So the next few cards, we of course have a few lessons in the sideboard for the field trip to get. So we have 1 Mascot Exhibition, 1 Containment Breach, 1 Environmental Science, and 1 Confront the Past. I used to also have the Introduction to Prophecy, the 3 mana Preordain, but in the end I cut that because it wasn't that good. Usually it almost always felt like a trap to get that when you learn, because if you really need to get a land quickly, then you have the Environmental Science, which is less mana and more reliable. If you're like in the mid game, then most likely you have other stuff to spend your mana on before you start casting 3 mana Preordain. So it was never usually that good then either. If you really need to get like a board wipe, then you don't really have time to be casting 3 mana Preordain. You would rather just loot off the learn instead. If you're in like the late game already, or you think you're like not going to cast your Preordain until you get to the late game, you might as well just immediately get the Mascot Exhibition, which is like a more powerful thing to be doing. And a lot of the time versus like most decks in the format, they do tend to have some target for your Containment Breach, like even versus the black-red decks, like just even if you haven't even seen them draw Fable or play Fable yet, you might as well just get this Containment Breach, because like they're probably going to find one at some point, right? Or you can hit their like Bankbuster or whatever. Like yeah, it would often be the case that like in most matchups, getting Containment Breach so you don't, as insurance for not falling behind on the board, was much better than getting the Introduction to Prophecy, even if your opponent hadn't played a target for your Containment Breach yet. So yeah, that's a bit of a tangent, but that's why I'm not playing Introduction to Prophecy anymore, only these 4 lessons. The Introduction to Prophecy, I think I cut it for either the 3rd Go Blank or another card, which I'll show you in a sec. So last 3 cards on the sideboard. 1 Necromentia, just very good versus the combo decks. Strip the whatever you're scared of so they can't play it. Pretty straightforward. Like the Go Blank, you have to be careful not to board it in versus decks where it's not needed. So yeah, don't get too eager about it. But it is important to have access to this effect when you're like a mono sorcery controlling deck, because you're not very good at playing reactively to things that, well, sorry, you're a reactive deck, but your only reactive tools are like board removal, because it's all sorceries. So you don't have instant speed removal, you don't have counter spells. So like powerful top decks are scary, so you do need to have a way to strip them, I think. Yeah, it's worthwhile playing that, I think. And there's enough combo decks where it's just like a really good card anyway. And even if you don't want to board it in, you always have it from the Mastermind's acquisition. So yeah, worth keeping that in mind. Next we have 1 Casualties of War. Just as a, like a, you know, the meme of like, it's the 5-6 mana card, quote unquote, for the grindy matchups. That's what this is. You know, you have the like various enigmatic decks that are playing all sorts of like creature, enchantment, land. What you know, you're gonna have lots of targets for this. Versus the green decks, you're gonna have like, you can kill their Khan, land, Willful Haven, creature, Khan target. You know, like there's easily hitting like 4 or 5 modes with it. Yeah, it's just the biggest like turnaround swing that you can play in the matchups that give you time to play it. Even versus control, just if you like kill their planeswalker and like one of their lands, especially if it's like a castle or a Hall of the Storm Giant or something, that's fine for 6 mana as well. So yeah, that's a pretty fine card to have too, I think. And the last card is 1 Thought Distortion. Just versus combo and control, again, it's really nice. Knowing that you have that in your deck, or if your opponent doesn't know that you have it, either way, they have to play around your tutors and everything a bit differently. Like, a lot of the time, your opponent can let your Dark Petition or whatever resolve and plan to counter whatever you search with it, but you know, if you have the Thought Distortion in your 75, then they can't do that. Yeah, it's just like a nice way to thread the needle versus other extremely reactive matchups. You just have to obviously be a bit careful of Narcissus Reversal, because that is a bad time. But yes, so that is the list. I've had it like, I played in like only 1 tournament with this recently, and I didn't do as well as I remember this deck doing, so I'm not sure if the meta has sort of like overtaken it a bit now, or I just got a bit unlucky, or I definitely made some like slightly sus decisions in terms of what I discarded with Thoughtseize and like mulligans and things like that. So I'm a bit rusty because I haven't played Pioneer for ages, but I'm definitely going to keep giving this a try. If I turn out not liking this, then probably I'm going to explore the Lotus combo deck as well. Regular viewers of this channel will know that I played the Lotus combo a lot in Modern as well. So hopefully some of the like muscle memory carries over. And I also played the Lotus deck for a while in Pioneer, like long ago, before Underworld Breach was banned, so I should still own most of the cards, like the Hidden Strings and all of that. So yeah, anyway, that's the deck. Just a nice bit of an interesting different way to play control / mid-range strategy in the Pioneer format. So if you have any comments, questions, make sure you leave those down below. Leave a like on the video, subscribe if you're interested to see more deck brews like this. This has been Li-Fi TCG, signing out.